The Pelicans offense is going to look very different this year, and I want to highlight two concepts that you're going to hear a lot about: playing with pace in small ball and why the two go hand in hand and how it has to do with roster construction. Plus, the Pelicans had their open practice. We're going to recap it. It's the Monday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans at NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Monday. We are back 5 days this week. Pelican season is underway. Preseason starts tomorrow. We'll kind of preview what we're looking for in preseason. They also play on Thursday, so maybe we'll do a live show on a different night. We'll figure that out. Maybe it'll be Wednesday instead, because I still enjoy doing all of those with you. But basically means we're back. There's a lot going on. It's awesome. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. At the open practice, anyone who said anything to me to say hi, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. The show is here for y'all, and I loved hearing everyone say that it was their first listen every day. I loved people coming up and saying that you were an everydayer. That means a lot, and I really appreciate y'all taking the time out of your day to include the show whenever in there. That means like the world to me, and it gets me so excited for this season. And I'm also excited for this season because I think this year is really interesting. I was talking to Antonio Daniels before the game, and we were kind of talking before the open practice, and we were talking about how this does feel like a make or break important year. And we were talking about the differences that they want to do. And it's going to be so much fun, but they need to get a lot right, and they need to make some changes from last season. And I find those changes just very fascinating with what they're going to be looking to do. And one of them has to do with the offense. We talked last week about how Brandon Ingram is going to be in control of the offense. I'm predicting a very, very big year for the offense, for Brandon Ingram, for Zion Williamson too. But BI is going to really take charge with everything. But there's also other fundamental changes that they want to make. And one of the words you're going to hear a lot about is pace. So if you're a new listener, I'll explain it very simply for you. If you're a longtime listener, or you're very familiar with advanced statistics, analytics in the NBA, this will still be a really good refresher, because there are some misnomers when it comes to the stat of pace. You can use it as a stat. You can use it kind of other ways too. But simply put, the pace stat in the NBA is more or less how many possessions do you have per game? How many possessions do you get per game? It's essentially an estimate, actually, but it's the number of possessions offensive possessions per 48 minutes by an NBA team. Pace is important because there's so many different styles of play. There are fast-paced teams. Fast-paced teams tend to use less of the shot clock, take shots early in the shot clock, whether they're just ripping shots, whether they're using to kind of create shots. Think the 7 seconds or less Suns, who kind of revolutionized pace. There's also slower paced teams that work into an offensive set every single time. These are teams that often play in the half court. Slower, they use the majority of the shot clock, and they'll take a shot with 6, 7, 5 seconds remaining. Teams that play with pace often get in transition and run and try and score fast break opportunities. So the faster your pace is, essentially, the more offensive possessions you're getting per game. This is important to kind of keep in mind when you look at points per game. Points per game is often a measure of how many possessions you get. If every team is shooting 50% from the field and everyone's just shooting twos, let's say, right? The team with more possessions is going to then just score more points. But it doesn't necessarily mean you were a better offense when the numbers start to change a little bit. You have teams that have bad offenses in terms of offensive rating that actually do somewhat well when it comes to points per game, because they're just playing so lightning fast. So pace is a way for us to use those possessions to kind of look at how teams are running their offense to find out what is more or less an efficient offense. Basically, who's good, who isn't on a per possession basis, but it's done over 100 possessions and stuff. So the Pelicans last year had a pace of 99.1. 99.1 according to Basketball Dash Reference, which we're going to use. NBA's site is a little bit different. That was 14th out of 30th. So they were in the top half in terms of pace, but they weren't particularly a fast team. There are teams that were getting more offensive possessions per game than them based off the style that they play. The Pelicans want to change that this year. They want to be a fast-paced team. They want to get out and run in transition. When you look at every kind of shot type, and there's quantifiable data on this, isolation style, kind of one-on-one playing, right? Post-up, offensive rebounds, off of handoffs, other things like that. We get an idea of what the scoring efficiency per possession of that play or per play type is. Transition is up there as one of the top ones. When you get in transition and you have a man advantage, a fast break opportunity, it's easier to score points. So the Pelicans want to do more of that this year. So if you want to do that, you have to get out and run. If they want to generate more pace when they play in the half court, they need to use shots earlier on in the shot clock. And you don't want them doing that just by kind of taking a shot. You've got to create an opportunity. That's where assistant coach James Borrego comes in and is going to put in a lot of off-ball movement and things like that. So they're going to get into the half court sets. They're going to move and get a good shot very quickly. Think about this, because I think this roster is well suited to this, but not everyone is. When you think of this roster, who's not well suited to that kind of style of play? When you think of the starting lineup of Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, Herb Jones, Zion Williamson, Jonas Valanciunas, who doesn't fit into that fast-paced style of things, moving around off ball, running, cutting. We know Zion can do it. BI is going to be running the offense. CJ works well off ball. Herb Jones is going to be working off ball. One name comes to mind, and it's Jonas Valanciunas, and this is why his name has been included in a lot of trade rumors this offseason. As I've repeatedly said, it's not because he's a bad player. It just, for what they want to do, does he fit? So the idea of pace, does that suit Jonas Valanciunas? Is he a fast player? Does he run in transition? Does he work a ton off ball? I mean, he does, but is he cutting? Is that a guy you can kind of really build that offense around? Not so much. The way he scores is with his back to the basket, posting up, which is one of the more least efficient methods of scoring in the NBA and also one of the slowest. The fit when it comes to pace and things like that just really isn't there. And they don't have, outside of Larry Nance Jr., another guy that can kind of really slot into that role and do it properly. And they can only use Larry Nance Jr. so much. There are limitations with him as a player being a little bit undersized. So this leads into the next thing that I want to talk about. Another phrase that you've heard a lot this offseason, small ball. Because Jonas Valanciunas doesn't really fit and the roster isn't perfect because of one odd fit, you have to play a small ball style of offense. Zion at the 5, Herb Jones at the 5. But here's the thing. I'm not sure this is something that'll work out. And I want to talk about that and what it means with roster construction coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Before we get to that, though, today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Gametime. We've all had bad and frustrating ticket buying experiences. Maybe it's just paralysis and indecision. Are you getting a good deal? Do you know if these seats are good? Can you really tell from looking at the little maps online and things like that? But with the Gametime app, they're going to make you have all the peace of mind you want with your purchase. You get to see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. The all-in price shows your total upfront cost, so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees. And you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. It takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And with the Gametime guarantee, that means you're going to get the best price always. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime's going to credit you 110% of the difference. They also have flash deals, so you can get last-minute tickets. You're bored on a Friday, don't know what to do. Open the Gametime app up and see what's out there. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team, the #1 Pelicans podcast. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Tell a friend about the show and support the channel on the YouTube page as well. And for your second listen today, Saints with a shutout victory. The offense looking better. Are they good? Are the New England Patriots that bad? I'm leaning towards the latter. Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints, going to break it all down. Good friend of mine. Make sure he is your second listen today. Okay, so let's get into small ball. If you're an everydayer of the podcast, I told you we would be talking about this, and we'll do a deeper dive on it, but I want to kind of touch on it here because I do think it's really tied to pace and how this team's going to be playing. If they want to play fast, Jonas Valanciunas doesn't fit, so you got to take him off the court. They don't have like a mobile big center that can play fast pace, so you have to play small, hence small ball. This is why you've heard Willie Green talk about Zion Williamson at the 5, Herb Jones at the 5, something they have done with both of these players in the past. However, and there's small sample size theater here with this, so we don't have enough data to necessarily make a conclusion, they have struggled with this. They have struggled with Zion at the 5 and Herb Jones at the 5. From a defensive perspective, and it comes to one area, and that's rebounding. They struggle with defensive rebounding when they play small. This is true when they go with Larry Nance Jr. at the 5, right? Think about that Minnesota Timberwolves game at the end of the season. I was at Mid-City Yacht Club with the Pels 12 for the watch party there. In the fourth quarter, after New Orleans had a lead, it was just Minnesota mashing on the offensive glass and getting second chance points and keeping possessions alive. And the Pelicans were unable to terminate those defensive possessions and get the ball back from themselves to get stops. Defense lost them that game, and it was defensive rebounding because, unfortunately, Larry Nance Jr. was undersized, and they don't close with Jonas Valanciunas for what they want to do overall. It's a problem. It's a big-time problem. Zion at the 5? That doesn't change. Herb at the 5, that doesn't change unless you find other ways to rebound as a team, and they haven't done that. Maybe they're working on that. I don't doubt that they're working on that, but it is definitely going to be a big concern because here's where offense leads to defense, defense leads to offense, all of those things. If you don't get stops, what are you doing? The opponent makes a basket. What are you doing? You're inbounding the ball. You have to take it out from out of bounds under your basket and inbound it. And you know what that means. Your opponent's defense gets back and gets set into their shell defense and what they want to do. And if you're inbounding the ball, you are not playing in transition. You're not then playing with pace. So if you play small to kind of maximize pace, but don't get stops, well, now all of a sudden you're not playing with pace, so you're not maximizing your offense, and that offense would still be good, don't get me wrong. But you see how this starts to kind of compound on itself a little bit, like the snake that's eating its own tail and everything here? That is a major concern to me when it comes to this. And so when we're looking at what this team needs to do, they probably need to make a trade sooner rather than later. You know, you rarely see NBA trades until the actual trade deadline. I think it's November 15th is the next guarantee date, or December 15th, one of those two. We'll look it up as we talk more about roster construction later this week and into next week as well. But you can see how the small ball idea could fall apart very quickly. And then you're kind of going back to what you were trying to do last season with kind of shoehorning Jonas Valanciunas in. And again, he's a good player. I agree. But he just doesn't fit what they're trying to do. And if that leads to more bad offense and that leads to Pelicans losses, this ain't good because this is a make or break year and they really need to get off to a strong start and build some momentum. They also need to get off to a strong start because if they do want to go all in and get a bigger name player, use some of the draft picks they have, you're going to need to be winning. If they have a 500 record or a losing record at the trade deadline, do you think ownership's going to say, we'll pay the luxury tax? Or are they going to say, trade a guy or two and dump them? It's going to be the latter. Absolutely. So getting off to a fast start's important, which maybe means you've got to try and make a trade sooner rather than later. This is why a guy like Jared Allen would be fantastic. There's other players out there that would make a lot of sense too. And before the open practice, I was talking to Shamit Dua of In the Know, and his Substack is really good, and you should absolutely subscribe to it. And we were talking about this exact thing. He made a really good point of, look, if you make a trade at the trade deadline for your move, for your center position, and it doesn't work out, you can't undo that mistake or fix things until the offseason. And at that point, your year is done. And if that move didn't work out, it probably hurt the team in some capacity. So maybe you're looking at them not making the postseason. On the flip side of that, if you make a move now or as soon as you can, if it's not working out, can you redo things at the trade deadline and give yourself another shot at this? For a year that feels so pivotal to me, make or break, a prove-it year that basically everyone around the Pelicans has said that it is, yeah, I think that seems rather important, right? It gives you more data. It gives them, the new player that you're bringing in, time to kind of figure out where they are and hit the ground running for the stretch run of the year around the trade deadline and then forward. There needs to, and I don't think that there isn't, let me be clear on that, but the sense of urgency for this roster needs to be there because of the situation they find themselves in. And I do think it is. I think they're scouring the trade market looking for it. I think this will be the roster that they go in with, but there's a reason they're not signing somebody to the open roster spot that they have, and that they want to keep that there. Maybe it's for a lopsided trade. It's also because there's just no reason to pay more in the luxury tax for one of those players. Another thing that a number of the Locked On Pelicans insiders mentioned to me, which is a great point that I forgot about, which is tells you how smart that group is. And if you want to join that, the link is in the description down below. You get to text me. A bunch of them were texting me during the open practice. I was sharing some things. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the third segment here. But I love that group. So if you ever have questions, we'll definitely be answering more of your questions on the live show. There's going to be exclusive content there. They're going to get the whole unedited interview with Brandon Ingram and Trey Murphy that'll be dropping at some point this week. I have one with Herb Jones too to drop for y'all. So join that below. It's $4.99 a month. You get a 14-day free trial. If you don't like it, you don't have to stay. That's really cool. ABJ504 did it, and then I think you left it, but you can come back anytime. So, I forgot where I was going with it. Oh, one of the things with the luxury tax is, look, if they stay in the luxury tax and just pay it because they can't get rid of Kyra Lewis Jr. or something like that, you also lose out on the luxury tax payments. So for every dollar you're in the luxury tax, you're paying an extra dollar. So a $5 million player that puts you over the luxury tax, say by $5 million, is a $10 million player at that point. But it also means you don't get the $10 to $15 million in luxury tax revenue that the luxury tax teams divide up between all the non-tax paying teams. So if that's $10 million you're paying in salary, plus missing out on $15 million, that's a $25 million swing. If this team's 500, they ain't doing that and losing out on that kind of money. You need to get off to a fast start. So you need to make sure you get the right center for your offense. Otherwise, it's still going to be clunky at times, or you're forced to settle playing small ball, which sounds great in theory, and we'll dive more into the lineups and what this would look like. Maybe tomorrow, maybe later in the week. But I have questions about it because the rebounding has been a problem with that. And then everything starts to fall apart. So this is why I think there should be a sense of urgency on finalizing the roster sooner rather than later and getting all of this done before the NBA trade deadline. Let me know what you think in the comments down below on YouTube. So coming up next, Pelicans open practice. It was a lot of fun. I was there. I'm sure a lot of y'all were there. I talked to and saw a lot of y'all. Let's talk about that coming up here next, because there was one thing that goes, oh, okay. It seems minor, but it's not. I'll tell you what that is. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Before we get to that, though, today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Jase Medical, the Jase case, which provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. And all it takes to get a Jase case is to fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of their board-certified physicians. And you get ongoing care from their physicians on any treatment-related questions. It's doctor-created, doctor-recommended. The big thing about the Jase case, which I think is important for everyone in South Louisiana, Look, if you have to evacuate, you might not be able to get in touch with your doctor or your physician because they're evacuating too. And if you need medication, if you have an emergency, the Jase case can do that. I ordered one because it's right there in my hurricane kit because you never know. There's been supply chain shortages. There's been natural disasters. There's been a pandemic. Have the medicine at your fingertips because it could save your life. So if you want to give the Jase case a try, get $20 off these life-saving antibiotics today from Jase Medical by using my code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's Jase, Jase, medical.com. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday for y'all, breaking down everything you want to know about the Pelicans team, the #1 Pelicans podcast, really doing a lot of deep dives, X's and O's stuff with the offense last week, today's show as well. And if you want to interact with me more, it's not on Twitter. It's the Locked On Pelicans Insider subtext. The link is in the description down below, both wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. It's a lot of fun. You can text me. Something you want to tell me, you just shoot me a text. It goes right from your phone to mine. I check it. I can respond to you. I'm going to be putting inside info and things like that, rumors that I hear, because I can be a little bit more off the record with everything there. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to being able to interact with y'all. It's $4.99 a month. Give it a shot. You get a 14-day free trial. This is the perfect time to do it. If you don't like it, don't want to spend the money, it's okay. The show's free and 5 days a week for y'all. And we'll keep doing the live shows and everything. And if you want to support the channel in any other way, just become an everydayer. Listen Monday through Friday because we are the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the open practice, fun. I love this event. The lines were long. I love seeing all the enthusiasm. It's like a back to school event. I'm just energized walking away from there. All of y'all screaming, I'm an everydayer or first listen. That was so cool. Anyone who came up to me and said, I appreciate the show. I love listening to you. You make someone even said they make being a fan of being a fan of the team like more fun, more interesting. It just means a lot. Look, I talk about basketball. This is one of the silliest things in the world, right? None of this is life or death or a big deal, but it's wonderful to be able to make an impact on people's lives. And I appreciate y'all letting me do that for you. So if you ever see me out at the arena, and I'm at every game or just out in general, say hi. I'm friendly. If you want to take a picture, I don't think you need to take a picture with me, but I am more than happy to take a picture with you. Shout out Keith from Lakeside Mall the other day. So the open practice was interesting. It's a fun event. I love the enthusiasm. The lines were long. People really wanted to go and see. Even after a down year, it says a lot about Pelicans fans and how passionate y'all are with everything. The players are interacting there. They're signing things. They're giving you their time in a way that you just never get from them. And most teams don't do something like this kind of just fan-friendly event. So for the Pelicans to put this on consistently every single year says something about their connection to the fans and what they're trying to do and build and all of that. So I just love this event. It's fun, right? There is one, and there's not much of a takeaway. They don't really scrimmage. They go through layup lines. You get to see them move, and then the rookies get embarrassed a little bit, and that's cool. They all wore hot dog costumes this year, which was great. It's funny. They didn't do the karaoke, which was kind of disappointing because that's my favorite. You got to hear Trey Murphy on the mic, and he was having a lot of fun, and it's just a natural dude with a lot of charisma right there. What I thought was interesting was when they introduced the entirety of the team. They went down every player on the roster that's here for training camp, including all the guys that won't be around in a couple of weeks. And I was talking to Ali Cassell of the Bird Rights about this, of who are they going to introduce last? Is it going to be Zion Williamson or is it going to be Brandon Ingram? And usually the last guy you introduce is the fan favorite, the leader of your team. Zion, most talented player on the team, big time fan favorite, #1 overall pick, right? Had all of the hype coming in. And he was announced second to last. They announced Brandon Ingram last. I think that says something about their offense and how they view him as a franchise player and what they're going to look like this year. Are they going to be more of Brandon Ingram's team than Zion Williamson's team? That's splitting hairs, and that's a semantics thing more than anything, but you get what I'm trying to say, right? They really are going all in on Brandon Ingram this year. Maybe it's also looking for him to be motivated because he's in a contract year. He has a lot of money he can earn, a lot of money that he can earn if he makes an all-NBA team this year. Are they trying to give him an opportunity to do that, which I think is great? Do they think he's going to be more motivated and play at a very high level? Last time he did this, he won Most Improved Player and made an All-Star game. He's not considered a star player, all-star player anymore. So they're giving him the keys. And by listing him last, I think that really does show that, say that. And it's not a surprise given everything that they've talked about and also some of the injury concerns around Zion Williamson in the past too. But I think you're still going to see a really good offense. Even if they don't have the roster fully exactly what they want, they're still going to play with pace. Small ball should work in spurts, and Larry Nance Jr. is, I think, probably the way to do it. But I'm going to be interested to see all of this in preseason and training camp. And there's a preseason game tomorrow on Tuesday. So we'll talk about what we're looking for because you don't want to read too much into preseason. That's going to be tomorrow's episode of Locked On Pelicans, and that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you all so much for listening. Join the Locked On Pelicans Insider Subtext group. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all tomorrow, a game day for the New Orleans Pelicans.